the great difference between the United States and the Chinas and the Russias of the world is that traditionally we have played team sports, right? That is our strength. If you want to fight a trade war against China, you actually ought to get your arms around America's European allies, because that's the way to actually win that war. And so you're right. I think that the Chinese are smart enough to understand that this is an enormous asymmetric advantage that the United States has, and that they ought to be trying to pick up support where they can get it. My institute runs a big meeting of defense ministers in Singapore every year. We had it a couple of months ago. 26 defense ministers showed up, and none of them favored what China is doing. And so the Chinese they're smart, they're cagey, they're trying to dig their way out of the ditch their policies have dug them into. And we ought to be a lot more worried about other countries learning to do what we do well at a time where President Trump is burning like a wildfire through America's goodwill with our allies.
Peter, thoughts on this?
Can't add anything more, but yeah.
Evelyn?
Well, I would just say that Putin and Xi need one another. They're very tactical in their use for one another. Putin needs Xi to demonstrate to the West that he doesn't need the West, he doesn't need Europe, and to make him seem like he has other options. The Chinese are very clever, and they understand they need Russia because they don't want a spoiler in their backyard on their border. They know the long game is they're going to eat Russia's lunch. The Russians, if you put enough vodka in them, you know, even in the military world, will admit that yes, China's their concern, and they're watching their strategic nuclear arsenal, for example. But the Chinese know full well that conventionally and certainly in a nuclear realm, Russia, they don't want to mess with Russia.
Andrew, quick thought.
Putin has willfully become China's junior partner on most diplomatic issues. Economically, politically, militarily, the trend lines are all unfavorable. But he's looking for alternatives. He feels that basically the Western alternative is now closed off. This is as good a deal as he's going to get.
As chair of this, I'm going to add my own view here, which is, about a dozen or so years ago, I was in Beijing and invited to meet the equivalent of the policy planning staff of Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I said, great, I'm going to finally ask the Chinese what their grand strategy in the world is. And they sort of jokingly said our grand strategy is try to keep Americans distracted in small Middle Eastern countries.
It's a pretty good strategy.
I want to say that when you think about it, when you raise this question, because China is mammoth. When you think about power, it's like the stock market. Power is a function of future expectations. And when you look at Russia, you look at China, it's very clear China is an extraordinary player. And so what I worry about this is a duplicitous hand, a sideways hand. We're talking somewhat earnestly about what countries and leaders are doing. I worry what they're doing in the sideways area of trying to create circumstances that distract us, that draw us away, that throw us off our game. And I think when you look at those things, I think Xi Jinping is flirting with Putin, not for big strategic reasons, but just to make us talk about it right here.